Hey, I'm Haussmann and I'm back, and I'm talking about Moon Knight again. That's right, I am reading every single comic book appearance that Moon Knight ever made. There's still over 400 appearances easily by this guy. Where we left off last time, Moon Knight had made 22 appearances over a bunch of different comic books, and he was just finally set to get his own solo series. But before we jump into that, I do have an interesting tidbit. Toei, a Japanese television company that made the Spider-Man series for Japan, obviously, while they were working on that Spider-Man series, they actually started development on a couple of other series, 3D Man, Silver Surfer, and actually Moon Knight. So before Moon Knight even had his own solo comic book in America, he was this close to getting a live-action TV show in Japan, but he didn't. And a lot of that was carried over into a manga, which I did not read. That is definitely something I'm probably going to take a closer look at in another video in the future, but for now, let's focus on this. Forehand's going to be a little different. Some of these issues I'm going to go more in depth on that I think that were more important to the character, and then other ones were just like, oh, this happened. So we'll go through some of them pretty quickly, some of them will be a bit long. Anyway, let's jump right into it with issue 1. With his 23rd appearance, it was also the first issue of his own Moon Knight series by Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz. And we get Moon Knight's origin. So we learn the background. Mark Spector was just Mark Spector. He was a mercenary for hire working with Frenchie and Bushman in Africa somewhere, and then Marlene is there and her dad, and there's this whole thing where they uncover the tomb of Khonshu, and they're gonna kill... Marlene's dad actually does get killed, and she feels like Mark Spector was responsible for it. He wasn't, and he's trying to be a better man, because he's not a good guy, he's a mercenary for hire. He's trying to be a better man, and he actually goes against Bushman, and gets killed, seemingly. He passes out in the desert, and some guys throw him down in front of the statue of Khonshu, and one guy checks him and confirms he's dead. Marlene's trapped in there as well. It's at this point that Khonshu, chooses Mark Spector and brings him back to life, but it's really... Nobody confirmed he was dead. Just one guy said he's dead. Nobody actually confirmed he's dead. And that's something that comes out through this whole run. Is Khonshu real, or is this all in Mark's head? He puts on Khonshu's cloak and goes and chases down Bushman and beats the crap out of him and saves the day. And him and Marlene are like, oh, hello, let's be boyfriend-girlfriend, I guess. He decides to go back to New York and become this crime fighter, Moon Knight. So he... and he decides then and there he's got to create these different identities. He needs to, because Mark Spector can't do all this. He needs to be Stephen Grant, the money guy. And he needs to be Jake Lockley to get his ear to the street. So that's when we see the dawning of these three personas becoming Moon Knight. It's actually, that one's a really good issue. So issue 2 is another really good one. It's Moench and Sienkiewicz again. These are all going to be Moench and Sienkiewicz unless I specify otherwise. They stayed on for almost all the series. We'll get to it. Issue 2 was really good. Moon Knight takes on the Skid Row Slasher. Basically, there's a guy going around killing homeless people. If you remember from the last video, one of Jake Lockley's friends is Crawley, Bertrand Crawley. He's a homeless guy who gives him information. So obviously the threat is to him. Gina's Diner shows up again, and in this one, actually, Jake Lockley just drops all pretenses. He brings in Gina and her 2 kids and Crawley to his house, and he's like, this is where I live. I'm Stephen Grant, but also I'm Moon Knight. And he's like, you guys help me out. I guess you probably haven't been realizing it, but you've been helping me out as Moon Knight, so I want to start actually paying you for this. He hires Gina's kids to give him information. He hires Crawley to give him information. Doesn't mention paying Gina, but he brings them all into the fold, so they're actually a part of Team Moon Knight. And Crawley is kind of gets this one moment where he's like, oh, this is great. I just needed to get a stable job to get out of this gutter and, not be homeless and be a good person again. And Moon Knight's like, well, no, you get more information when you're homeless, so I need you to stay homeless. And Crawley's like, yeah, okay. It ends up going on to this story. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm about to, so spoiler alert for this comic from 1980. They go and they end up finding that this guy is looking for Crawley specifically, and it's because Crawley is his dad who abandoned him and his mother when he was a kid, so he grew up and kind of went crazy and wanted to kill homeless people until he could find his dad and kill him. And he ends up fighting with Moon Knight and getting knocked off a roof and dying, and Crawley is like, oh... It's actually a really heartfelt issue. I'm not doing it justice here. So many of these issues are actually amazing and worth reading. Comic book storytelling in the late 70s and early 80s was very different than it is now. Some of these things are told in one issue that now would be dragged out over at least 6 issues. There is dense storytelling packed into one issue. And Sienkiewicz's art just absolutely sells it. I'm going to go on more about that later, I'm sure. Issue 3, we see Moon Knight versus the first appearance of the Midnight Man. Midnight Man is just a thief. This one actually gives us a really good juxtaposition of Moon Knight and Stephen Grant. We see a lot of Stephen Grant's relationship with Marlene, and actually how Marlene does come to help Moon Knight. That's really about it. I think in this one's the one where we learn where Frenchie is actually the one that builds and takes care of the helicopter as well. I guess at the end we also do see Mark Spector bought a bunch of art and donated it under the name Mark Spector. He doesn't do much by Mark Spector, as we learned in these comic books. Stephen Grant and Jake Lockley all have their place. That's the other really interesting thing when you talk about Moon Knight's alternate personalities. Frenchie only refers to him as Mark. Marlene only refers to him as Stephen Grant. Gina and Crawley only refer to him as Jake. They see him as Jake. Marlene sees him as Stephen, no matter who he is. And then Frenchie just always knows him as Mark Spector because he knew him before everything. Issue 4 actually retcons his first appearance a little bit. We learn that it was Frenchie that went to the committee and convinced them to hire Mark Spector to take on Werewolf by Night, and actually gave him the costume and everything. And was like, here, give him this, and tell him to be Moon Knight. Just kind of retconning his origin to line up more with the origin they set up in Moon Knight #1. Other than that, the committee hires a bunch of guys to take him out. Nothing fancy. And Moon Knight wins. Issue 5 is one of those ones that's kind of nothing. Moon Knight goes to a haunted house to track down a couple of criminals, and they think he's a ghost, and nothing, really. Issue 6 is a good one for all the identity stuff. He's also got a butler, Samuels, who kind of knows everything, but it's really minor character, but he's like, oh, and Moon Knight comes home, and he's like, oh, Mr. Moon Knight, a letter came for you. And then he takes off his mask, and he's like, well, no, I'm not Moon Knight, I'm Steven now. He's like, oh, well, this telegram came for Mark Spector, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll read it to him. Really shows how he just differentiates the second he takes off the mask, you know? And he goes in, he's talking to Marlene, and he puts on his Jake Lockley costume. He's like, yeah, I'm Jake Lockley now. Like, I'm gonna go get some food at the diner. And Marlene's like, oh, man. But they end up going to some tropical island on vacation to call in this favor that Mark Spector had. Once again, nothing major.
One other fun fact of note in issue 6 is that Moon Knight makes reference to the fact that his strength that he got from being bitten by the werewolf has finally worn off. So I guess he did have some enhanced strength from being bitten by Werewolf by Night. I'm not sure if that was referenced earlier or if I just missed it, but there it is.
Issue 7, again, it's not like nothing groundbreaking. It does just more to establish the characters and everything like that. A phenomenal story. Just a story. It doesn't do anything in the grand scheme of anything. It's just a story. If nothing else, issue 7 did establish that Jake Lockley has now got a new fake mustache. There's something in the drinking water that kind of makes everybody go crazy. Moon Knight is kind of running around the city beating the crap out of everybody, trying not to get people to drink the water, and cell phones aren't really a thing, so he can't just phone Marlene and be like, hey, don't drink the water. And she does. He actually has to fight with her. He has to fight with Frenchie. And it spills over into issue 8, and it's just more of the same thing. Once again, like, it's really good. Nothing special happened. The mooncopter crashed. I think that was the second mooncopter already. We'll get a new mooncopter right away. Maybe that was the third mooncopter.
In issue 9, we get some really great character work. Mark sees that Bushman has escaped from prison, and then the Midnight Man returns, and he's mad at Moon Knight for stopping him last time. He actually steals the statue of Khonshu from Stephen Grant's house. We've established in earlier issues that Grant took the original statue of Khonshu back, and he's got it in his house, and it kind of creeps Marlene out. Midnight Man steals that, and he's actually working with Bushman, and he smashes the statue, and Moon Knight, he manages to save the day that day. Like, Samuels is kidnapped, and he saves them before they drown, but then he just really has his first mental breakdown. And that carries over into issue 10. Like, with Khonshu destroyed, he doesn't know, he doesn't have a purpose, he doesn't know what to do. And he actually just kind of wanders off into the streets, and he's like, I'm not Jake Lockley, I'm not Moon Knight, I'm not Stephen Grant, I'm just Mark Spector, a broken man. And he disappears for a few days, and everybody's out looking for him. Gina and Crawley finally find him, and they bring him back, and he's like, he's really just down on himself. He doesn't know what to do. Like, without Khonshu, he has no guidance. He has no reason to be Moon Knight. Marlene actually ends up revealing, he's like, oh, you know what, I had a plaster statue made, and that's the one they smashed. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And he gets his confidence back. He becomes Moon Knight again. And he goes and beats the crap out of Bushman and saves the day. And then he comes back home and he actually questions to Marlene. He's like, did you have the statue made before or after? Like, is this the fake that you're telling me is the real one now? Or was it the fake that was smashed? And she's like, don't worry about it. And he's like, you know what? You're right. I don't really need the answer anyway. And that goes to bring further questioning in to whether or not the whole Khonshu thing is real or if it's in his head. Issue 11 gives us the pretty much only character development we see for Frenchie over the entire series. That can't possibly be true, but an ex-girlfriend of his shows up and Moon Knight helps to save the day. In the 12th issue of the series, 1 year under its belt, we're introduced to Morpheus. And Morpheus is this... I've read this issue a few times and I still don't quite understand Morpheus. Marlene's brother's a doctor and he was working with this guy who's having issues and he gave him this drug and it took away his eyelids and made him, he's a cool looking character, and then he's got these powers where he can like Darkstar kind of, if that rings a bell, pull out a D-list superhero to reference. Dark energy, he can control dark energy and stuff, and then he can also do stuff with dreams. Probably besides Bushman, this might be the most memorable villain to come out of this series. And now we're going to take our first foray out of the Moon Knight solo series. We're going to Marvel Team Up Annual number 4, where Spider-Man teams up with Moon Knight, Daredevil, Iron Fist, and Power Man to take on Kilgrave the Purple Man, and Kingpin's in it too. Nothing terrible to note. This is the first time that Moon Knight meets up with Daredevil and Iron Fist and Power Man, so that's kind of cool. And it's always nice to see him mixing around with the other heroes. Fun fact, this is written by Frank Miller. After that, we'll go back to Moench and Sienkiewicz with Moon Knight number 13, where he teams up with Daredevil. This is the first introduction of the Marvel Universe itself into the Moon Knight series. There had been references and things like that here and there, nothing big, but this time we get Daredevil and the Jester. Turns out the Jester has gotten out of prison. Daredevil's like, I'm gonna keep an eye on this guy. His cellmate in prison was just some regular guy that Moon Knight had put away, so Moon Knight's like, well, I want to track this guy down because he's gonna be doing something. So Moon Knight's following Jester, hoping to lead him to this other guy. Daredevil's following the Jester because he's like, I'm gonna put that guy back in jail. And then as soon as Jester attacks the guy, Daredevil swoops in. He's like, oh, that's it. That's your one chance. I'm gonna go beat the crap out of you, put you back in jail. And Moon Knight's like, no, he's leading me to something big. So Moon Knight swoops in and actually fights with Daredevil. He knocks him into an arcade so Daredevil can't hear anything. It was just by luck. Moon Knight ends up kind of getting the best of them, but then they like, oh, actually, let's team up. And it's kind of interesting because they meet here for the first time, even though they just met in Marvel Team Up Annual number 4. Neither one of those references the other one. So anyway, it's a good issue, fun issue. Also of note, right around this time in Fantastic Four number 227, we see Alicia Masters working on a statue of Moon Knight. And then in 229, we get to see the full statue revealed. And the Thing is like, that guy, he's a goof. Why are you making statues of him? Nobody likes Moon Knight. Moon Knight's a phony. It's actually really nice to kind of see that carried over from the Marvel 2-in-1, where Thing is just dismissive of Moon Knight. Back into the Marvel Universe for Moon Knight's 37th appearance ever, his first appearance in an Avengers comic with Avengers number 211. Donald Blake gets dropped off at the Avengers mansion by a taxi that is driven by Jake Lockley, and Jake Lockley is like, where's that scrawny guy going to the Avengers mansion? I should go check it out. Don Blake at the time was the alter ego of Thor. Then he's actually compelled to go in for some reason, and he comes in as Moon Knight, kicks down the door, is like, hey! And then all of a sudden all these other heroes show up, and it's like, what is going on? And it turns out Moondragon was like using her mind powers to get everybody there to try and get the Avengers to help her. It was weird. We get a pretty cool fight between Moon Knight and Iceman, of all people, and then eventually they're all like, I'm out of here, this is stupid. And Moon Knight's like, yeah, screw you guys. And he leaves. His next appearance was in Rom number 23. He's a space knight. He's a big robot guy, and he was teamed up with Power Man and Iron Fist for some reason, and the Daily Bugle was like, there's an alien robot menace on the loose. And it just shows different panels, like there's Spider-Man in one panel looking for him, Moon Knight in another panel, Daredevil, Captain America, Iron Man's like, I'm not gonna go out there. If people think there's a robot alien, they might think it's me, so I'm not looking. That was it. There was one panel. Then we're going back to the Moon Knight solo series for issue 14, where we get the first appearance of Stained Glass Scarlet. Again, this is another classic series. Like, if you're going back and looking at a few of these, you know what? In the comments, I'm going to put a list below of the best ones you should read. This is definitely one of them. Stained Glass Scarlet is almost like the Punisher, but not quite. But she's killing bad guys because her son kind of went down that path. It's actually a really good story. I'm not going to spoil it here. There's not much to spoil. Number 15, we meet Zevos. Number 15 was an interesting one. Number 15 was interesting because Moon Knight fights this guy in a giant rat costume. Issue 16 was another interesting one. Nothing of note happened, except right on the cover you can see here, it's like, guest starring The Thing. And there's this kid who really looks up to Moon Knight, and his dad's a cop, and his dad's like, cops are the real heroes, Moon Knight sucks. And then his dad is murdered, but it's an accident, and it's deemed an accident, and no one's really looking into it, and the kid's like, Moon Knight will find who killed my dad. And he finds the Thing coming out of the opera or something with Alicia. And he's like, oh, Mr. The Thing, can you help me get in touch with Moon Knight? My dad was murdered. And the Thing, again, is like, Moon Knight sucks. The Fantastic Four can help you, kid. You're looking for Moon Knight? Get out of here. And then he goes on. The Thing does feel bad. He doesn't team up with Moon Knight, but he sends a message out over the airwaves that Frenchie picks up. That's like, hey, look into this. Moon Knight's like, okay, and he goes and saves the day and solves the crime. And actually, at the back of this one, we get our first B story. There's 7 pages by Jack C. Harris. Sienkiewicz did not do the art, and it's actually a story about Mark Spector while he was a mercenary. It's nothing major, but it's kind of neat. Moon Knight made a guest appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 220. Spider-Man and Moon Knight team up and fight some crime. The only thing of note is to fool some bad guys, Frenchie actually puts on a Moon Knight costume. That's kind of neat. In Moon Knight 17, we actually start a story that kind of lasts over 3 issues. We meet Nimrod Strange. In this one, we see that Marlene does take martial arts training with Mark, so she's not completely unskilled. Moon Knight fights with some guy named Master Sniper. Moon Knight kind of has less reoccurring villains than the Punisher. He doesn't necessarily kill them all, but like the Blacksmith, Zemos, Master Sniper, like all these characters don't show up in more than one issue here. There's very few that reoccur throughout this series. Outside of Bushman, other characters that did actually show up in other series, like Morpheus or Scarlet, still only had a handful of appearances.
So you've made it this far. Feels like you're enjoying this. If you could hit like, that would really help me out, and I would greatly appreciate it. Issue 18 continues the whole Nimrod Strange story as Moon Knight kind of goes with the government to get caught up in this whole thing. It's over in Israel. Like, it's a big international incident, I guess. Marlene uses some of her skills to actually join Nimrod Strange's all-female bodyguard squad, and she actually kicks the crap out of one of them, showing she is actually capable. In the 19th issue, Nimrod Strange puts on this costume and all this armor and becomes Arsenal, which is a weird-looking villain, but he becomes like, I'm a supervillain now, this is cool. And he grows fond of Marlene and actually starts kissing her and whatnot, and she has to play along with it, even though she doesn't like it. Moon Knight sees this, and he's like, oh. He's like, now I got 2 reasons to take you down, Nimrod Strange. You're threatening the whole world, but you kissed my lady. I don't like that. So it's good showing Moon Knight actually does care about Marlene, so he's not completely split. And that jealousy affects him so much that in the 20th issue, when he beats the crap out of Arsenal, he actually pulls up his mask a little bit and spits on him once he's unconscious. And Marlene sees it, and he's like, ooh, you know, Marlene, that wasn't very professional of me. I shouldn't have done that. And she's like, nah, it's cool. Like, I get it. He's like, okay. And they defuse the bomb, swim back to shore, and Arsenal wakes up, and he's like, well, I'm going to blow this stuff up anyway. And he blows everything up, except it's just himself and his boat. So He's dead, and that's another villain that won't be coming back. Next time we see Moon Knight was in the original Contest of Champions. Do you guys remember the Contest of Champions? So 1982 is one of Marvel's earliest crossovers, and that, again, just a little aside, goes back to what I was saying about the dense storytelling of the olden days. This was a big event that had every superhero ever in it, and it only took 3 issues to tell the story. Basically, the Grandmaster and the Collector made a bet, like they do, and every superhero from Earth was brought up to this big spaceship, and they got to pick teams. And it shows everybody where they were and what they were doing when they got picked up. And Moon Knight was teaming up with Daredevil, and they're on a helicopter ladder and got teleported away. After that, Moon Knight's seen a couple times in the background, nothing major. He doesn't get selected, so he doesn't show up in issue 2. But in issue 3, he's just very briefly in the background, but that counts as 2 more appearances for the Fist of Vengeance. Moon Knight 21 sees Vincent Alcazar taking over for the art. Bill Sienkiewicz probably just needed a break or some time to catch up. Moon Knight fights some zombies, but like not cool zombies, like voodoo zombies. And to do that, he does team up with Brother Voodoo, so there's some novelty there, but not really much else in this issue. Though it does feature a backup story by Alan Zalentes. That's a name you might want to remember for the future, but who knows? I actually do know. This issue doesn't actually have Mark Spector or Moon Knight at all. It's got Khonshu. It's just kind of showing how the statue probably does have supernatural powers and can give a bad fate to bad people. Morpheus returns in Moon Knight 22, and this time he's got a better hold on his powers. He's a little stronger, and he's actually like bringing people's nightmares to life. So as Moon Knight has to face off with some of his bad dreams, he gets into a physical fight with Stephen Grant, Jake Lockley, and Mark Spector. So this gives us a good look at what Moon Knight actually thinks of these other 3 personas that he is. He takes out Stephen Grant with one punch, like just boom, nothing, so he doesn't think much of him physically. Jake Lockley's a little more of a fight, and then Mark Spector is the biggest fight he has, and Mark Spector's like, you remember me, right? I'm Mark Spector. You were good enough to wear my skin and live in this body for 20-some years, then you threw me away, and you never used me anymore. Moon Knight ends up winning, and it's a really good issue, like seeing how the mental stuff works with Moon Knight again. And that story continues into 23 with Moon Knight fighting Morpheus. He ends up winning, but there is a cost, as Marlene's brother Peter had some new powers that kind of counteracted Morpheus's, and he ended up giving up his life to stop Morpheus, so he died, and Marlene was obviously quite not cool with that. Next up is a sort of team up with Iron Man himself in Iron Man number 161. A bunch of millionaires, including Tony Stark and Stephen Grant, have been invited to some underwater submarine research thing. It's weird. They get down there, and AIM is all like, we got guns and we're taking you hostage for whatever reason. So Stephen Grant's like, boom, and he punches a few of them, and they all get held captive, and Tony Stark's like, I'm gonna become Iron Man, and it's a whole thing. Eventually, they get trapped in an area, and there's this old lady that's like, oh no, I think I'm having a heart attack or something. And they're like, well, there's only room for one person in the escape pod. We should get her in there. And Stephen Grant's like, piss off, everybody. I'm taking it. He just jumps in the escape pod and takes off. Doesn't care what anybody thinks. And Iron Man's outside, like, trying to hold the thing together, and everybody inside's trying to figure out a way to... It's flooding, and they're trying to stop it. But Moon Knight actually goes up, and he fights some bad guys and tracks down the guy that knows how to do everything. So he's up on the surface, like, doing the detective work and actually saving the day. And he finds the guy, and he gets on the comms with Frenchie and patches this guy through, and they explain how to stop the thing and save the day, and Iron Man comes out, and he's like, hooray! And everybody has a big celebration, but Moon Knight's like not really seen after that, so it's whatever. Moon Knight 24 sees the return of Stained Glass Scarlet, and Moon Knight himself really struggles with the whole morality of killing, basically, because Stained Glass Scarlet wants to kill bad people, and Moon Knight's like, well, I should stop her from killing, but at the same time, like, the guy she's gonna kill is really evil, so he really wrestles with that. And at the same time, Marlene's like, Steven, we need to talk, and he's like, not now. He's really ignoring Marlene. Issue 25, it's a milestone issue, it's a double-size issue, and it's actually one of my personal favorites. We get a new villain in the Black Spectre. He's this guy's an army vet, and he comes back and kind of, people are treating him badly, he can't get a job, nothing's going right for him, and he ultimately wants to run for office, but people won't let him because his dad was a former politician, so he becomes a villain. He becomes the Black Spectre, and he models his villainy career after Moon Knight. He's like, oh, so he takes a costume like Moon Knight, but dark. He kind of like, Moon Knight's doing this and this and this as a hero, so I'll do this and this and this as a villain. It's a really great issue, but at the same time, his alter ego is running for mayor, and Moon Knight's like the only person that suspects it. He gets Marlene to go, he's like, Marlene, I need you to infiltrate this guy's office, and she's like, no man, you've been ignoring me, and I'm breaking up with you. And he's like, ooh, okay, I wish you didn't break up with me, but like, can you do this? And she's like, yeah, I'll do this, but then like, that's it. And there's a fight, and like, it's a really good issue. It's one of my favorites. And Marlene does eventually say, like, ooh, you know what, maybe I made a mistake, and she kind of takes him back. Power Man and Iron Fist number 87 takes place in the middle of a big heat wave in New York, and Moon Knight is fighting this low-level thug, and they fight on top of this water tower, and they both fall in, and the guy dies. And Moon Knight is trapped at the bottom of this empty water tower on top of this roof, and nobody can find him, and his earpiece fell off and broke. Frenchie and Marlene actually hire Luke Cage and Iron Fist, the heroes for hire, to find Moon Knight, and they go around, and they're looking for him, they're talking to people, they talk to Crawley. They get caught up in this whole thing, and the low-level thug that Moon Knight was chasing was tied to this guy named Commodore Planet. It was a whole thing. It was written by Denny O'Neil, and eventually they find Moon Knight, just like he's like been in there for a couple of days. He's gonna die, and they pull him out. He sort of sticks around for Power Man and Iron Fist number 88. Iron Fist takes a taxi, and Jake Lockley is the driver. So for those of you keeping track at home, Moon Knight has now had in his cab Captain America, Thor, The Thing, and Iron Fist. I really hope this trend keeps going, because just having Lockley in there is great. and Moon Knight does not show up in the issue. Issue 26 is another really good story. It's another one of my favorites. It actually started as a short because Sienkiewicz was needing breaks, and issues are 30-some issues at this time. He would write some shorter issues and then some backup stories that someone else could do. And one of these he passed on to Sienkiewicz, and Sienkiewicz is like, you know what, we can add to this and actually make it a full issue. And it wasn't quite a full issue, but it was. And Sienkiewicz really wanted to draw it. And it's basically about this guy who reads the newspaper, gets some bad news, and then just starts punching everybody. He's on his way to a funeral home, and he's just punching everybody in sight. It's called Hit It. Basically about the cycle of abuse. He's beating the crap out of everybody, and he finally gets to where he was going, which is his funeral home, and he finds that his dad is dead. And his dad was abusive to him as a child, and now he's taking it out on anybody he can because he'll never get the chance to hit him back. And Moon Knight shows up and won't hit him. It's actually a really good issue. For not meaning much in the grand scheme, it's an amazing issue. And then that issue also has a backup written by Denny O'Neil that shows Commodore Planet again, and those are his 2 appearances, so there's a bonus complete history for you. Complete history at Commodore Planet, 2 issues. Issue 27 was written by Stephen Grant, which I always get a kick out of, with art by Joe Brzezowski. If Doug Moench isn't writing it at this time, you kind of think it's not going to be that beefy in the overall art. But it's a good issue. There's a couple of corrupt cops and whatnot. One interesting thing of note is that Moon Knight thinks it's all tied to the Kingpin, and he confronts the Kingpin, and the Kingpin just punches him once and lays him out. And he's like, okay, well, I guess maybe the Kingpin's not involved. I don't want to deal with that. Moon Knight number 28 sees Marlene and Moon Knight return to the original tomb of Khonshu, and they go down there, and there's just a whole scheme involved. At this point, Moon Knight's kind of losing some of his faith in Khonshu, but not really. But then he goes down there, and he's like, there's things that happened that may have been Khonshu, but they may have also just been nothing. So it really, he restores some of his faith in Khonshu, but at the same time, we are still left not knowing if Khonshu is a real thing or not. Issues 29 and 30, one story, kind of Werewolf by Night comes back, and he's being attacked by this evil cult church thing, and Moon Knight and him team up and they stop it. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issue number 72, is another one of those one-panel specials. Spider-Man is out because Doc Ock has escaped, and he's looking for him. Then he sees a helicopter, and he swings over, and he's like, sometimes Doc Ock uses a helicopter, and he's like, oh, it's just Moon Knight in his helicopter, and then he swings away. They don't even talk. So Moon Knight number 31, Doug Moench is writing, and Kevin Nolan now is on art. Bill Sienkiewicz is gone. He just went on to do other things. It's really interesting how terrible art can really bring a comic down, and really good art can also lift a comic up. Looking at these now as deeply as I did, I really appreciated how great Bill Sienkiewicz's art was, but the art throughout the rest of this is good too. It's another 2-part story. Issue 31 and 32 are both really good. There's a group of street thugs, a gang, and they're kind of roughing up these guys, give us protection money, like that. All the shopkeepers and the merchants along the shop kind of get together, and they're like, no, we're gonna go beat the crap out of these guys, this is bogus. And Moon Knight intervenes, and one of the kids is knows the guy that owns the pawn shop, and he's like, oh, he's a really good kid, and he tries to do the right thing. And it's one of those things that also out of the early 80s or mid 80s, I feel could have been a really good movie or even a musical. I don't know. Really good, well-crafted story, and I liked it. Unfortunately, issue 33 was the end of Doug Moench's run on Moon Knight and at Marvel. He had some disagreements with Jim Shooter, and he decided to leave. He got a job at DC. It's all good. He worked for Marvel again. This was his final issue on Moon Knight, his creation. Basically, Moon Knight takes on this big guy, big strong guy, Druid Walsh. He's not necessarily all there. He's kind of harmless. He's a criminal, and he's big and strong, but he's mostly harmless. And then there's a reporter that takes interest in him and kind of basically eggs him on. Moon Knight takes him down. He ends up dying. It's another Moon Knight villain that doesn't show up again. There's a somewhat heavy-handed message about the media staying uninvolved in their stories. It's a good issue. It's not really the big crowning jewel cap that should end such a run like this, but it's where Moench left. Tony Isabella came on for issue 34 with Bo Hampton doing the art. And it's a basic filler story, run-of-the-mill. Moon Knight takes on some drug dealers, and some of the drugs turn this guy into a wolfman. He fights another wolfman, and it's fine. Issue 35 is still written by Tony Isabella, and Kevin Nolan is back for the art. And to me, this is the start of the new Moon Knight. I really appreciated Moench's whole run, and I'll talk more about that in my closing thoughts, but this, to me, was Moon Knight's coming out party to the whole Marvel universe. It opens with Moon Knight taking on the Fly, a Spider-Man villain. The Fly actually knocks him back, defeats him in a fight and cripples him, and the Fly takes off to go fight Spider-Man. He never comes back in the issue. And Moon Knight, takes off his mask, and he calls Frenchie. He's like, I am hurt. His back, I think he broke his back, and he is in a wheelchair for most of the rest of the issue. He goes, and he has given up being Moon Knight, and so, in turn, by giving up being Moon Knight, he's given up being Jake Lockley. He's given up being Stephen Grant. He's like, I'm just Mark Spector now, and I don't know, he kind of says, actually, he's like, maybe I could just be Stephen Grant from now on. Would you like that, Marlene? And Marlene's like, yeah, that's cool. And he's like, okay, good. Khonshu allowed this to happen. Khonshu's probably not real anyway. And he goes, and he's at this Russian dance, and then a mutant shows up named Bora, and she's just basically killing all these Russian ballet dancers. So because of that, he still is trying to be involved. He's trying to be the good guy, and he goes and he talks to Professor Xavier of the X-Men. He's like, there's a mutant here. What's going on? How do I deal with this? And Professor Xavier kind of reads his mind. He's like, oh, you're Moon Knight. You got to deal with this on your own to prove it to yourself. And he's kind of like, yeah, but can you guys just come anyway? Just for backup, just in case. And he goes, and that is something that's weak. The whole broken backstory, or he can't walk anyway. He kind of just nope, sheer determination. I put on my Moon Knight costume and I stand up. And it's something. To me, it was really rushed. But still, he overcomes that and he can walk again. And he's like, now I have to defeat Bora to prove to myself. And then when we go to the opera, we do see like the X-Men, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm, they're all there as unofficial backup. And then the Thing leans over, Benjamin Grimm from the Fantastic Four, and he's like,
"What are you guys doing here?"
and they're like, "Oh, we're the unofficial backup." He's like,
"Oh, okay, I guess Moon Knight wasn't sure, because call us the official backup."
and he looks, and the whole Fantastic Four are there, and he's like,
"They called us just in case."
and then the whole fight breaks out, and Bora's got these wind powers, and Moon Knight ends up taking her on and taking her out, and then the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are like doing crowd control. It's a really great issue, and it brings in the whole Marvel universe. Like for the first time, it's like, we got the X-Men, we got the Fantastic Four. Moon Knight is now front and center, part of the Marvel universe, not his own little corner. And it's awesome. It's a great issue. And like I said, if you start to distance yourself from Moench's run, starting with this issue, putting him right in the middle of the Marvel universe where I think he needs to be all along. One of my favorite issues. Alan Zelentis comes on for issue 36. Told you to remember that name. I knew he'd be back. Bo Hampton's doing the art. And this one, he teams up with Doctor Strange. And I had mixed feelings about this one. Alan Zelentis was going to go on to Moon Knight for, well, the foreseeable future. This whole Doctor Strange thing. Basically, Marlene has an amulet, and it's cursed by mystical crap, whatever brings Doctor Strange there, and Doctor Strange is trying to help, and he's like, "No, Moon Knight, man, I need your help here. Like, you definitely are possessed by a priest of Khonshu. Like, you got this spirit in you. Khonshu's real. Forget about it." So the whole time that like Moench was building up the doubt, like, is Khonshu real? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm Moon Knight because I want to be. Maybe I'm Moon Knight because an Egyptian god told me to, and I died. I don't know. And I really like that. And he was actually kind of doubting it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm probably just doing this because I want to do it." And then Doctor Strange is like, "Nah. Egyptian god, yeah, let's do some magics." And they save the day, and they win. And then we come to issue 37 and 38, still Alan Zelentis and Bo Hampton, the final two issues of this Moon Knight run. And Mark Spector's father is dead. Not really that great. There's nothing special. We see Mark's father was a rabbi, and he does admit, as I was trying to solve this and fighting the crime as Moon Knight, Mark Spector became too personally involved. Like, I need to separate these things. Like, maybe I don't need all these identities. And by the end of the issue, he kind of sorts everything out and comes to peace. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty much just Moon Knight and Mark Spector now, I guess. But like, I'm also a brand new man." It's a nice closing issue. Not really the whole nice bow on the whole package to end the series that I would have hoped for, but it's certainly not the end of Moon Knight. After that was Marvel Team Up number 144. Moon Knight and Black Costume Spider-Man team up and fight some bad guys. Kerry Burkett wrote it. Don't know if he exactly knew what was happening. Nothing happened. Jake Lockley's in it. Crawley shows up. They fight bad guys. Also around this time, but out of continuity, was What If number 34. And it was one of those wacky what ifs that, like, what if the Fantastic Four were bananas? What if Odin was Spider-Man's uncle? And it had 3 different Moon Knight appearances. One was what if Moon Knight got his identities mixed up, and it kind of shows Jake Lockley with a white mask on punching a bad guy. Ha ha ha. Another one was what if the Silver Surfer, White Tiger, Knight Rider, Iceman, and Moon Knight all fought Wendigo during a snowstorm? It was just a white panel. Ha 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 ha. Then the last one, just another quick one panel. What if Moon Knight had 3 different identities? An exterminator, a rat fur millionaire, and a comic book editor. Ha 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 ha. Humor was different in the early 80s. And now we come to my closing thoughts on this Moench run. Honestly, it was an amazing run in comics, but when Moench was writing Moon Knight, he was a part of the Marvel Universe, but he was very much in his own. A lot of Moench's stories worked well like that, like in this dark corner, not involved, there's not superheroes on every corner. He's got his dark stuff to deal with, and he's dealing with it in his own way. But like I said, I personally, while I really love these stories, and I'm glad I read them, I like Moon Knight better when he's teaming up with Daredevil, or when he's fighting, colorful bad guys. That's how I prefer Moon Knight. That said, I'm so glad I read these stories. I probably will read quite a few of them again. As I said, down below I'll have my list of what I think are the essential ones, but I'm not going to revisit these regularly. It's early 80s storytelling, and they are dense. As for all his identities, there's a question whether this actually was the start of the dissociative identity disorder. He definitely had separate identities, but he didn't really have trouble controlling them or getting them confused. Like, he just put on a different hat, and he was Jake Lockley. He put on the mask, he was Moon Knight. He made those switches himself, though he did keep his identities very separate. From what I've read going forward, he's kind of just pretty much Mark Spector for a while, so I'm curious to see when all this comes back. As for the adaptation, I don't think it's going to go for any of this stuff. Maybe some of the supporting cast and a lot of the stuff. But these are really good issues, and I could see this being a great standalone film series, outside of the MCU, if they take a lot of Moench's work and kind of adapt that, which I don't believe is what they're going to do. I've already got a head start on reading the next stuff. Spoiler alert, he joins the West Coast Avengers, so that's going to be exciting. So be sure to like and subscribe to be here for more. I'm going to try to get these out quicker than I have been, because rumor has it, the Moon Knight series might be coming sooner than we think. I filmed this one all over the place. My hair became different lengths, my mustache got longer, I changed a shirt at one point. If you notice when I change my shirt, you have to like and subscribe. I don't care, whatever, do what you want. If you like Moon Knight and you know someone who likes Moon Knight, share this around. I love you guys. I love talking about comics. Bye!